webinar today. We're joined by the wonderful Claire Brumby and Katy Wade. We're delighted to talk to you today about how to become an effective and communicative manager. This was an idea that Katy, Claire and myself came up with, and we just feel like there's a bit of a gap at the minute. So any skills we can help sort of uplift today, hopefully there'll be some of the key takeaways for you. I would love to now introduce you to Claire Brumby. If you could please introduce yourself, Claire.
Hi everybody, as you can see from the slide, my name is Claire Brumby. So I'm a coach, a speaker and a trainer in leadership. As you can see on the slide, I've pitched on Dragon's Den, so some people may recognise me from that. I think the thing for me with communication is it's the real rock bed to a lot of things that we interact in both our business and our life, and that's why I'm so passionate about communication, be that written, as you can see I've written a book, be that from pitching like on Dragon's Den or delivering speeches and keynotes. It's all about communication, and the better and more refined we can become at speaking, about listening and really engaging in communication, then that's going to really set us up for greater success both in our careers, in our lives, and also as a leader and as a manager. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my insights around communication with you as we go through this webinar. I'll pass you over to, I think it's Katy now, is it, Katy?
Thank you. Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm the Learning and Development Manager at Bespoke HR. So we're a small consultancy based in Surrey, Guildford. And we offer all sorts of HR support for small businesses mainly. Again, I'm just super passionate about communication, and wouldn't life be easier if we all just spoke to each other instead of just assuming that everyone knew what we were talking about or thinking all the time. So yeah, looking forward to today.
Fab, thank you so much, Katy. It's lovely to have you both on today. So just a little overview of the main aspects we'll be covering today. Why effective communication is important, essential skills, styles. Katy and Claire have been really helpful as well, and there's a slide later on that you should be able to download, as I said earlier as well, with some links to some really helpful tools. We'll also be discussing feedback and how HR and business owners can work together to improve communication. So without further ado, we will kick off with a poll. I believe we've got lots of people logged in now, which is fab news. So coming up first, great idea from Katy. So we'd love to know what conversations do you find difficult in the workplace? This is multiple choice, so maybe choose a couple that probably impact you the most. There's quite a few different options, so please do have a look at those and start clicking away so we can see what we need to focus on today. That would be fab. Some very interesting answers here, Katy, I thought, especially disagreeing with your line manager.
Yeah, I think people don't enjoy those conversations generally, do they?
No, they are definitely some tricky ones. The good news is I can see people have started to submit their answers, so that's good. I always think as well, discussing pay with your team, that brings up a whole another ball game as well, doesn't it? That's pay transparency seems to be quite popular in the news at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, so we're about 51% of people have answered on here, so we'll just leave it a little bit longer because then we can see the answers, and Claire and Katy will have a little chat through about how people are feeling and what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, please do, share your thoughts. It'll be great to be able to have a little catch up on this. I think we're nearly there. Maybe a few more to answer. Cool, lovely. We'll wrap up on that and we will pop to the next slide to see what the poll has said. Cool, so this is actually quite a mixed response, but the highest looks to be dealing with personality clashes in your team, followed by saying no to your line manager or colleagues. So Yeah, Claire and Katy, take it away with your thoughts on that.
I think the great news for me with, dealing with personality clashes in your team at 65%, I think the great news with that is that can absolutely be dealt with, because when we've got a personality clash, it tends to roll back to the fact that we don't have that communication there from the very deep root and stem of, working with colleagues. And I think if we can get into the constant habit of having this communication, I think people can really overestimate but underestimate a conversation. And we overestimate it in that we can get stressed about it, and we underestimate it in that the fact it's simply speaking, it's simply talking, it's simply sharing. And so we can make things more complex than they actually are. So when we've got a personality clash, it can be because we've let something fester, or we've not really met somebody where they are in terms of the EQ aspect of it. So what I'm seeing here is all of these things can absolutely be solved with effective communication. How about you, Katy?
Yeah, I think the reason generally why we don't like dealing with personality clashes is because we're kind of, in our mind, criticising people's personalities, which is very emotional, and it's much easier for us to pull up people in terms of their performance instead of it's just two people not getting on, which I appreciate is really tricky. But I think my top tip when you're dealing with personality clashes is really focusing on what the output is in terms of two people aren't getting on. What's the problem that is causing? So telling people, look, I appreciate that they're not your best friend and you don't need to go out for beers with them after work, but this is the effect that it's having on the business and morale or whatever else, instead of saying you're just not a very nice person, which obviously isn't the way to go with that sort of conversation.
I think one thing that I'd like to see more conversation and discussion and openness around is the mental health with your team. Because I think, if we can normalise that a lot more, then that's going to help in the workplace such a lot, and that's going to help with the individuals, and that's going to help with the teams, and ultimately it's going to help with the success of the organisation. So I think there's if we can bring about talking in this way, because that's quite sad that people still don't feel like they can talk about the mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about respect, isn't it? It's talking to people in that respectful way. So you can give bad news, you can give bad feedback, but as long as you're doing it respectfully and taking into account their thoughts and feelings, then that's your role as a manager, isn't it?
And I guess we'll come on to this, Katy, won't we, in terms of the feedback, because there's a time and there's a place to do it, and there's a way to engage in that where we're mindful of how it can affect, different aspects. So, but yeah, we can come on to that, can't we?
Great.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Claire and Katy, for sharing your thoughts on this. Lovely. So we will kick off with why effective communication is important. And there are some highlights on the slide here, but Claire, would love to hear from you. Why is effective communication important?
Well, I think I'd like to speak to a comment that Katy made earlier on, actually, where she said it would just be great if everybody would just have a conversation and speak, which reminded me so much of a brilliant quote that I like about communication. And it's by George Bernard Shaw, where he says the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And so this comes down to us not really conveying what we're wanting to say, or avoiding having that difficult conversation, which is only difficult in our mind. And this is what creates this illusion where we think the conversation has taken place, but actually, has it taken place? And has it taken place with the clarity that's required? So I think that's a really great starting point. So let's not fall into this trap of having this illusion and this perception that it's actually taken place, and has it actually taken place? So the impact of communication on team dynamics can be good and bad. If we've not got the clarity there, if we've not got this joint mission of where we're heading, then obviously we're going to have some difference in the dynamics in the teams. And then if we talk about the effective communication in the impact in the world, we kind of touched on the mental health aspect when we were talking about having the conversation to do with mental health. I've just seen a question coming in there. And do you want me to answer that one now? How do you deal with someone who is naturally negative to a task suggestion? I already know it's going to be a battle before speaking with them. Shall I answer this question as it comes in?
I think so.
Do you want me to go with that?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So the question is, how do you deal with somebody who is naturally negative to a task suggestion? I already know is going to be a battle before speaking with them. Well, what I would say there is, I think it comes back to, you know, unfortunately, you're quite a long way down the line, because this comes down to having this. So I talk a lot about the effectiveness, the 5 dysfunctions of a team with the Patrick Lencioni model. And really, to have the conversation requires the trust at the base level of that. And when we've got that trust, we can go there. So if we've already preordained that they're going to be difficult into this conversation, it means that somewhere along the line, we haven't got that trust there with the team member. So it's about bringing it back down to basics. And you really using our emotional intelligence to think about how can I be more effective in my communication as a manager all the time. I think this is the thing. I think communication and conversation isn't just something we just jump into and then jump out of. I think it's something that we do all the time. And the more we can be really honed into how we are seen and how we show as a manager, then the more we're going to be able to have these difficult conversations, and we're going to understand our team members and they're going to understand us a lot better. So when we do have to have these things or present a new idea or, you know, change ways of working, we've already got the buy-in because we've kind of like built the building blocks of how we operate with them. So I think it's a case of building that teamwork, which is to answer that question. Do you have anything to throw with that, Katy?
No, other than I think you will always have those people in your team that normally they don't like change, so they anything that you're changing or introducing causes them some concern. So for me, it's getting to the bottom of why they're being negative about that, because most people don't come to work to be negative, so there will be something that is causing them to feel those thoughts. So whether it's a change in system which is causing them anxiety because they don't like the change, or whether it's they're worried about it creating more work for them or more work for their team or whatever it is. So again, it's just making sure that, like what Claire was saying, that we're really talking to them, getting their feedback and listening and seeing if we can get to the bottom of what the reason is for their negativity.
And that brings me on to another quote, which I love. And this one is from Stephen Covey. And he states that the biggest communication problem is that we don't listen to understand, we listen to reply. And so this is where we really need to be honed in on our levels of listening. So are we listening to just form a response? So are you listening to me now to then think, well, if I was in a room with Claire, I would say this? Or have you truly listened to what I've said in terms of the biggest problem is that we listen to reply, not to understand? So how can you go then forward and think, right, okay, so I'm really going to try and listen to understand, not listen to reply. And these are the active listening skills and these levels of listening. And so these are all the things which make communication so important. Anything to add there, Katy, or shall we move on to the next slide?
Happy to move on.
Fab, thank you both. Cool. So Katy's got an example, haven't you, to share?
Yeah, so this is just, I use this as an example quite a lot in the training that I deliver for our clients. And really it's talking about times when we feel like we've been really clear in giving an instruction, but actually how that instruction has been received is different to how we meant it. So I have a colleague that has got a 16-year-old son, and she was watching TV one night and he came into the living room and said to her, "Mum, I've got a nosebleed and we've run out of kitchen roll." And she replied saying, "Oh, don't be so ridiculous, use toilet roll instead." So off he went and sorted himself out, and she didn't hear from him again. And then she went into the kitchen later on that day, and this is what she saw. So what he had done is he had seen the kitchen roll holder in the kitchen had run out of kitchen roll. his mum had told him to use toilet roll instead, so he popped the toilet roll onto the empty kitchen roll holder, which is obviously not what my colleague meant at all. She meant use the toilet roll to sort out your nosebleed, but he took it as an instruction to pop it on the empty kitchen roll holder. And I just think it's a really good example of he actually didn't do anything wrong, and he did exactly as she asked him to do, but it wasn't meant in that way. So, and I think we do that quite a lot throughout our working day, really, is we ask people to do what we think are really simple tasks that we really understand, but are just perceived in a completely different way. And that's on us, that's not on them.
Such a good point, Katy, and I love this example. It's just brings so much clarity. I just want to quickly address another question that's just been filtered in. It's from Tasha. They've mentioned they've got someone who's going to work abroad in just a few months' time, and they've got a couple of big events coming up before then. Apparently, they seem to be quite checked out and are cherry-picking the work they do. So they're just wondering, any advice for a good way to deal with this when it comes to communication?
I think, shall I go, or would you like to go, Katy?
Yeah, go for it.
I think I would ask, have you actually had that conversation and just said, I'm observing this is happening, and I would start by having the conversation, because it could be, see, this is the thing with communication, we already preordain because it's our thoughts. So we've got our thoughts, but we don't know what's going on for that other person. And so until we've had that conversation and actually tabled it, then we don't know, because this person may not actually be aware that they're cherry picking. They may not actually be aware that they've kind of switched off a little bit. Is it because they're feeling stressed out because of the move? Is it because they are actually cherry picking? I think it's a case of having the conversation and then going forward from there, rather than having that preordained, I think this is what's happening, and then putting it to them to see where they're at with it, and then coming up with like a joint way of working for the last 2 months that you've got together. That's my suggestion. What would you say to that, Katy?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think there's a lot of trust involved, isn't it? When you enter into an employment contract with someone, you've got to trust that they're going to do what you're asking them to do, and vice versa. I think it all comes back to the communication, and perhaps when we see this quite a lot when people resign as well, and they're working out their notice period, and you obviously don't get the performance out of them that you would expect if they had just joined the business. And I think that's normal and something that we probably need to accept to some extent. But I think in this situation, if they're planning, I'm not clear on whether they're coming back to work for you afterwards or not. If they are, then I would be speaking to them about how it seems like they're cherry picking what they do at the moment, and perhaps we can work through priorities together and what are the important things that get done, and remind them that they are going to be coming back at some point, and we don't want to ruin that relationship, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing. Lovely. Pop on to the next slide. So this was from Katy. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about this number on the slide, and then Claire will get you to share some of your experiences.
Yeah, so I think this is just a stat from the CIPD who say that 69% of managers avoid giving negative feedback, which I don't think will come as a real shock, really, because I don't think anyone enjoys giving that negative feedback. But what I find really interesting is that when you do a poll to employees, actually what they want is they want that honesty from their manager. And I'm sure we all want that honesty in terms of how we're performing. If we weren't doing something right, we'd want to be told about it. But for some reason, when we've got to deliver that negative feedback, we shy away from doing it, even though we know it will be welcomed because that's what we want. So I think it's just about making sure that we're giving that negative feedback in that respectful way. And I think it will be welcomed.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. I think what I'd say here is, and we kind of touched on this when we first got together in terms of It's only our perception that we feel that they're going to take it in a negative way. And I think it's about us framing it in a constructive way. And I know that we have got some resources at the end of this where you can look at how to give feedback. But I think the thing with feedback is we really need to normalise it. Positive feedback will pave the way for us to have the more challenging conversations for the constructive feedback. So I always remember from being, and I mean, this is a long, long time ago, and it was my first piece of feedback I was ever given. And I didn't really understand that it was feedback at the time. I was 15 and I was a KP, a pot wash, in a local hotel. And I was so shy and I didn't dare wait on. I didn't dare leave the kitchen. I was such a shy teenager and I didn't want to. I'm not going out. Don't make me deliver food. Don't make me go onto the pass. Don't make me. And I just would literally hide myself away in the sinks, literally in these big sinks, washing pots all day. And the hotel manager came up to me, and I heard his footprints coming toward, his footsteps coming toward me. I was like, I just wanted the sink to swallow me up. And he gave me the most amazing feedback. And he just said that some of the people in the restaurant, the a la carte restaurant, had sent some money directly as a tip to the pot wash, because without the pot wash, the smooth service wouldn't have happened, and the job wouldn't run smoothly. And so that made me feel on top of the world. So then when he needed to deliver any constructive feedback or negative feedback to me, he'd already paved the way because I was open and responsive to the feedback. So I think as a great manager and a great leader, we need to not just jump in and give feedback when it's time to readdress or put somebody back on track. It's about how we're always, so I imagine it like a piggy bank. And what I say when I'm training, it's like literally you're filling this piggy bank. Think of it as leadership coins. And you're putting a coin in every time you give some positive feedback, every time you show that you're vulnerable, every time that you show the true you as a leader and as a manager. You're filling this little piggy bank all the time with these leadership coins. And then when you need to like check that in, like I'm checking in the piggy bank now, it's got 20 coins in it, and I'm going to pull on 10 for this feedback that I need to give about the employee who I think is cherry picking. You've already built this respect. You've already built this foundation of where you can actually give this feedback. Now, what I would say about feedback is it's how we do it. We've got to make sure that it is observational, so it's something that you've observed. It's not hearsay. We've got to make sure that it's factual and it's timely and it's constructive. Otherwise, it's just your opinion of something that's actually not going to progress your talent. It's not going to progress you as a manager. It's not going to progress your team or your organization. It's just going to fall on deaf ears, and it's going to cause antagonization. And so we're not going to be, striving forward to where we want to go. So, but that's what I would say. I would say pave the way and give the great feedback like I had. And then when you do need to address something, make sure it's done in that way where I've said it's observational, it's factual, it's timely, and it's constructive. And then there are different ways we can do that. So we can feed forward, we can do different ways of doing feedback. And I would also say that feedback is something that if we can just normalize all the time and feed up as well as down in the organization, then that's going to foster this natural culture of feedback. And I think it's always a great question to ask somebody for feedback on something that you've just done. Is there any way that I could improve that? And so if we normalize it, that it's a conversation, think about what I said at the very start of this session. We make conversation and communication sometimes smaller than it should be and sometimes bigger than it should be. And at the end of the day, it's talking and it's us sharing our thoughts and it's just being mindful about how we do it. But we need to do, feedback needs to be normalized, both up and down. Then if we can take feedback up, so if somebody is feeding back up to us, for example, then we're going to retain that talent because they're going to feel heard. When people don't feel heard in an organization and we're not listening to them, then we're going to lose that talent. And then that's going to have repercussions to the team and to our bottom line of success, but also re-recruiting. I'll leave that one at there because I could talk forever on that one. I don't want to run out of time, so I'll hand it back over.
Thank you so much, Claire. That was a really good insight. And I think you're right. That kind of reflects what you'd mentioned before, how, great leaders do lead by example and they mirror that great communication. I think that's such a good point. And I will pop on to the next slide now. Cool. So we just wanted to sort of highlight these essential communication skills and the different styles in which people do this. And everyone has their sort of strengths and weaknesses. But we just wanted to talk a little bit more about this. So Claire, why is active listening considered more a foundational skill for effective communication when it comes to a managerial role?
Because we all know, I think a real great thing to always bear in mind is to reverse engineer it and sort of think about how we feel when we don't feel like we're being heard. So it's the difference when your colleagues, you know, come to work and it's just like, you all right, you all right, you all right, you all right. That is nothing. That's just passive. That's just, you know, you may as well not speak, because all that's going to do is then say, well, yeah, I come into work every day and she just says, are you all right? And I say, yeah, all right. But she doesn't really want to know if I'm all right, because it's just, you know, blah, 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 blah. That's not active listening. We need to really get to this active listening point. And so actually this comes back to one of the questions earlier on about, you know, we know that this member of staff is going to behave in a certain way. Going forward, if we can actively listen, like ask meaningful questions about the person, about how they're finding their role, or about, you know, just getting to know the person. And this active listening is a great skill, because then we hear things that aren't said, and we can hear that through language, but we can also hear it through the non-verbal communication in terms of the body language. So sometimes the actual speech and the body language are in conflict. So I'm going, yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. But that's, no, I'm not all right. You can see from my body language that I'm displaying that I'm not actually all right. So the active listening is the real foundation, and these are the levels of listening where we go into real deep listening. And this is coming back to the Stephen Covey. We listen to understand. We don't just listen to hear the words, like you know, we don't. We listen to understand. So when we've got that active listening skill and we're completely in the room, it's like being in the moment. So I talk about being in the moment a lot. If we're in the moment at every given moment, the person we're with is going to get the best of us, and we're going to get the best out of that person, because we're going to hear and see things that we wouldn't see and hear if we weren't active listening and being in the moment. So then that brings us on to the clear and concise messaging. So we avoid the misunderstanding. So I apologise if you can hear my dog barking in the background there. I do apologise. So clear and concise messaging. So it's where we avoid the misunderstanding, and a way to, I think the heart's for my dog Flash, thank you. Clear and concise messaging. So we avoid the misunderstanding. The way we can do that is, so in the conversation, just ask and be natural about it. Do you understand what I've just said? But again, not in a confrontational way. Do you understand what I've just said? Like that completely changes the tone. I'm being aggressive. But when we're talking and we're having this conversation and they're listening to us, and we can just repeat back, can I just check in? Can I just ask if I've just heard you right? So we're clarifying. So this avoids the misunderstanding. So it's about us listening first and foremost, because when we're truly listening and we're picking up on the different aspects, tone of voice, tonality, paraphrasing, you know, what's going on with what they're saying? What aren't they telling me? What's going on with their expression? What's going on with their body language? So it's about being in the moment and listening to all of this. So I've kind of covered the non-verbal communication. Power of body language is so, so powerful. And when we can really dial into that and be with people, this kind of like taps into the emotional intelligence aspect of it. So, you know, when we're really able to dial into that. And empathy, this is how we can build that strong relationship. Again, think about, remember the little money box, you know, the leadership money box. When we can be empathetic, then people really feel heard and understood. And that is going to build the strong relationship. So when you do need to pull on your team, for instance, if you've got a crisis or you are wanting to implement a way of working, you're already going to have some sort of buy-in by doing all of these things. And again, the emotional intelligence. This is how we can really, so the levels of emotional intelligence is first and foremost, it's when we understand, you know, our own emotions, and then we're able to experience them. And then we can really be open to what other people are bringing as well. So it's all about us really going into all of this in the conversation. So now I've said all of these things, I'm probably thinking we're all viewing a conversation and communication in such a different way rather than just having a chat, because there are so many layers to it. Does that make sense to you, Amy? Yeah. Do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I was going to say, Katie, is there anything else you wanted to add before we go to the next poll?
I mean, it's all such good points from Claire, and I completely agree. I think the only other thing to add is just being really careful about your written communication, particularly when you've got an issue about something. And I'm sure we've all written emails or text messages that have been taken in completely the wrong way, and that's because you haven't got the power of body language that or tone of voice that Claire was talking about. So by all means, if you do have to have a difficult conversation with someone, then follow it up in written communication if you need to, but I would never have that communication in writing as the first port of call. It should always be a face-to-face, or if it can't be face-to-face, on the phone, so at least you can hear tone of voice, because otherwise it can just be completely blown out the water in terms of how it's received.
How often do you get a text and you read it again, you think, are they being funny with me? You do, you think, you know, especially my kids, they'll send me a text and I'll be like, what? But then when you, like, you'll reread it, or you'll like, again, but this is to be, this is where you would text, say, do you mean this? So you clarify what the meaning was, you know, rather than just taking umbrage and thinking, oh, they just said this to me. And then before you know it, we go up the ladder of inference and we say, they've said this, they meant that, so that meant that, so that meant that, so this means I ain't got a job anymore, this means I'm leaving, right, I'm looking for another job. And we can go up that ladder so quick with our own perceptions of what we think we've read or think we've heard. And this is where we need to have this clarification. And so this is why repeating it back or making sure we've got the handle correct on what we think is being conveyed to us is so important. But you can only do that, of course, if you're in the moment and if you're listening to understand, not listening just to fire straight back. So, yeah, I agree, Katie.
And I think that's important as well, Claire, isn't it? In terms of that's why it's so important to get to know your team better. So I quite often come across people who say to me, well, I don't care what they did at the weekend, that's not my business, or I don't care what's going on in their personal life, that they're here to do a job and that's all I care about, which is a real mistake that some managers or leaders make, because actually if you know more about the person that you're managing, then those conversations just flow so much easier.
A really great team exercise that I love to do is to do the shield, whereby, you know, people put down in the shield their ways of working, their personality, what, you know, and once you know that about the fundamental build of that human you're working with, then you will communicate differently. Because some people, you know, I remember when I worked in a big office and it didn't really agree with me because I didn't like the noise. Because when I'm working, when there's too many people around me, I'll just be inclined to chitter chat. I'll just talk all day long, and I wouldn't knuckle down and get what I needed to do done. So therefore, it was impacting on my work because I was just chatting all day to everybody, and so that didn't really work for me. So had people have got to know me at the base of that and said, what is your best way of working, and how can we best, you know, what looks like fun to you in a work environment, or what looks like stress to you in a work environment, then we would have had that better team group work going forward, because we would have all known. But yeah, we need to know the personalities of people, definitely.
Oh, thank you both so much. That was really insightful. We're just going to pop on now to another poll. So anyone who would like to, please have a little look at this. Katie came up with this great one. So it's choose the communication style that you feel you use when you're managing your team. So we've got a few options to choose from. This isn't multiple choice, so do kind of choose the one you think is most like you. So there's authoritative, persuasive, consultative, collaborative, and a hands-off approach. So we will wait for some people to start clicking away. And then we'll see what the results come up with. And again, I can see some people sharing their little reaction things to things that Claire and Katie are saying. So thank you for sharing. It's always really good to see how you're feeling and what's popular. Cool. I think this is a little bit slow, this one, so please do answer when you can. While we wait for this poll, actually, someone has asked another question. So this is from Nikki. Do you think the increase in neurodiverse work culture has affected the way we communicate with and perceive our colleagues? Claire, do you want to answer this? And then Katy, maybe you could share your thoughts too.
Just repeat the question again for me, please.
Yeah, of course. Do you think the increase in neurodiverse work culture has affected the way we communicate with and perceive colleagues?
I think that depends on the organisation. I think it depends on the individual. It depends on the team. But I think it's something that we need to, work more with. But the great thing is, it's literally down to communication. It's if we are really locked in and bothered about getting to know our staff and working to their strengths and understanding them, and again using the emotional intelligence to meet them where they are, and we all meet each other where we are. I think you're never going to change people's perceptions entirely, because everyone's going to always have their perception. What we can do is to give that point of education where people have got a better understanding, because things can be jumped to conclusions of without that conversation taking place, or without that communication taking place, and without that other perception being brought to the table as well. But I think it's something that we need to embrace and have more conversations about, to be honest with you. How about you, Katy?
Yeah, I agree, and I think definitely you're right in that the with the question around our workforce is definitely more neurodiverse than it has been or we talk about it more, I think, than we used to, and it's recognising the value that can bring to the organisation in terms of improved innovation and better processes and like you say, getting playing to people's strengths. So what are the strengths in the different people that we have working for us? I think in terms of the way that we communicate with and perceive colleagues, I'm not sure if you mean by that question in terms of the way that we communicate with people that are neurodiverse. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the question, and I think again it just comes down to that knowing more about them, what makes them tick, and understanding their strengths, like Claire said. And I think really things are improving.
Yeah, I do, but it really is the bedrock, and that's the irony of this webinar, because it is about the communication. In communications, perceptions, strengths, weaknesses, and you do need like a diverse mix of people on your team. So if we look at like DISC, for example, and we look at insights, if we've got a team full of blues, for example, or we've got a team full of reds, for example, we're not really going to get the full capacity of that team going. Whereas if we've got different people who can bring different strengths and different ideas and ways of working to the team, then it's better for everybody, to be honest with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing. I'm just going to see if we've got some answers on this poll. Otherwise, we might just have to talk about it a little. Yes, we do. Great news. Cool. So, huge whopping 73.4% there, isn't it, on consultative? Would love to hear your thoughts, Katy and Claire.
Do you want to go, Katy? I seem to just go first, and
because
we tend to agree.
I think it's no shock that I think most people have gone with that consultative, and I think that's definitely, if we were describing how we want to be as managers, I think that's what we'd all like to say that we are. And I think it's just been really, sometimes we have to be really self-critical in terms of the way that we are managing and think, okay, that's what I want to be. Am I doing that? But I think the big thing is that there are going to be times where you need to be more authoritative in terms of making you've made a decision, you haven't got time to speak to everybody about it, this is the way that it's got to be done. And there will be other times where actually you should be taking more of a hands-off approach and letting your team come to their own decision. So I suppose that the real answer here is that you're, and I appreciate we didn't give you this as a box to tick, which I'm sure you would have all ticked it if we had, but your communication style and the way that you manage people needs to change depending on who it is that you're managing and the situation at that time. I mean, I've worked with people in my team that like to be given really positive feedback all the time. That's what motivates them, and that's how I get the best out of them. But there are other people that if I give that positive feedback to, particularly in a public way, they would just completely freak out and not like that recognition at all. But similarly, I've worked with other people in the past that like to be micromanaged. There are other people that like to be more hands-off. They like to make their own decisions, and we only know that through getting to know them and their communication style.
I totally agree, and this comes down to us being a great leader, doesn't it? You know, yes, we can be managers, but we're all leaders. You know, first of all, we're self-led, and then we lead whoever we're working with, and so these really, for me, show different leadership styles as well. You know, and just to talk to, you know, the point where you said about the authoritative style, can you imagine in the pandemic where we didn't, you know, we were consultative when something needed to happen really fast? At certain times, you know, as a manager, as a leader, we have to be commanding and we have to step into that authority. But what I will say there is, the more we've done the work and been an effective manager and met our colleagues where they are and show this emotional intelligence and built this piggy bank full of our leadership coins, they have got that respect and we've got that buy-in already for when we need it. So what we're doing, we literally every day we show up at work as a manager, as a leader, we should be thinking about building for our future, because then when we need to pull on that, we've got the resources. So yeah, I just wanted to say that these are really, along with the leadership ones, depending on where we're going as an organisation at a given moment, or whatever decision is being made at a given moment, you will pull, like you've said, Katy, on different styles to get the best from the team, and change that depending on who you're speaking to, always with the knowledge that we're listening to understand.
Thank you both so much.
I was just going to say, Amy, I think we've probably all got that person in our lives, whether they're a friend or family member or just someone that we know of, who says some quite offensive things sometimes, and when they get challenged on that, they just say, well, you know me, I just say it like it is. If you don't like it, then do one type thing. And I think it's down to us to challenge those people, if you've got them in your business, to kind of say, well, hang on a minute. It does matter, because we're grown-ups and we should be speaking to people in a respectful way. We should be caring about their feelings and how it makes them feel. So, but there will be other people that you can talk to in that way, and you can say it exactly like it is. So you can't just have that, this is me, this, like, take it or leave it. You've got to change the way that you communicate depending on who it is you're communicating to.
I think in that instance, I think it's a case of us doing that work ourselves and having this growth mindset. Because I think if we're fixed on a certain way, that this is the way I've done it, and I've done it like this forever. And you know, we've all had managers and leaders like that who are very dictatorial and very like, well, this is it. And I would question their growth mindset. And if somebody doesn't have that willingness, when they know that a certain communication style is met with, you know, a grievance, then it's the responsibility of the person to work on themselves with their mindset and think about, how can I adapt my communication skills so I'm able to communicate with different people, with different conversations in different times for different reasons. So I think it's a personal responsibility that we all hold, and our own self-leadership, to become the best at communication that we can be. I think the responsibility, I think if everybody took it on board as their own responsibility to be the best communicator and the best listener and the best leader and manager that they could be, then we'd have a different array of organisations up and down the workplace.
Thank you so much. It's amazing how much these polls get out of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fab, cool. So we've just got a little bit to share on things to consider, real life examples. So Katy's just going to share a little bit about behavioural profiling now.
Yeah, and I think this really comes, we've probably talked about this already, really, but there's lots of different tools that you can use for behavioural profiling. So I use DISC for our clients, and there's insights like Claire mentioned before. There's several different types, but that's a really good way of understanding how people like to be communicated with. And I had a particular client where they had two senior managers that just couldn't get on, that it completely broken down in terms of relationship. And what we did was we did behavioural profiling on them, and we consulted with them mediated, I suppose, in terms of explaining, showing each other's profiles and making them understand that they were both motivated by different things, and their communication styles and wants were very different. So once they understood how each other liked to work, then they learned how to communicate. So that they're not the best of friends, don't get me wrong, but they have learned how to communicate with each other and not take the offence that they would normally take when they weren't communicated in the way that they wanted to be communicated with originally.
Thank you, Katy. And Claire, I think you'd mentioned as well how this can lead back to EQ. It'd be good to hear what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think it's about us being mindful and reading the room, basically. So we know which tone of communication to take. So if we go back to the previous poll and we think about, okay, how do we normally like to communicate? It's about reverse engineering that and thinking about this team member and thinking about, you know, again, if we know the profile, if we know somebody's a yellow and we know that we've got a really great relationship with them anyway, and we've built up our coins in this leadership, you know, piggy bank, we can address the conversation in a different way. Whereas if they're blue and we don't have much of a relationship with them and we come into something, again, our emotional intelligence helps us to then think, right, okay, how am I entering in this conversation? What's the what outcome am I looking for in this conversation? It's always great to know what outcome we're looking for and then reverse engineer that, and then that paves the way for us to have where we want to go with the conversation. It's about, you know, I keep banging on, but it's about really listening, active listening, being in the moment and having the emotional intelligence to meet them where they are.
Thank you so much. I can see there's a couple of questions that have come through, so I'm aware time's running away with us as always with webinars, so we'll come to these at the end. So they're on our radar, and I'm just gonna slide along. So yeah, feedback, constructive feedback. Here are some highlights here, but Claire's got some really good points she'd like to add on feedback.
Mm-hmm. So giving good feedback is crucial because it reinforces the positive behaviours and accomplishments. So think about what I said earlier on about being a pot wash. I got that feedback, that boosted my morale. Honestly, you've never seen pots and pans get washed so speedy or be so sparkling, because that boosted me and it motivated me. So then that helped me behave in a different way to everybody in the kitchen, and so we have this morale going. But it also fosters strength and positivity and trust. So you come back to this trust element. We trust more when we've been built, when we've got this communication going. We've got that trust, and it can lead to better job satisfaction, higher levels of engagement, and it also, like I've said previously, it paves the way for us to give this constructive. When we've been given, positive, we're paving the way for that. So, and constructive versus criticism, understanding the difference is kind of what I said earlier in terms of, if we're just going to give criticism, you did that wrong and that was rubbish. Okay, so where do they go with that? What was wrong? Why was it wrong? What are the implications of that? How do you want me to improve? You don't just say to somebody, well, that wasn't up to standard, bang, leave it. We've got to be constructive. So what was great about what you did? And remember, it needs to be timely, factual, and, constructive, and what you've observed. So that's the difference between constructive and just criticizing. Anybody can criticize. We can all criticize, but you've got to come up with, the working ways forward. And I think once you've done that, I would then turn that into like a SMART objective. So we know where we're going and why, and we've got an end destination in mind as well. So techniques for delivering effective and motivational feedback. We've got some resources at the end, because I'm aware of time, in terms of like feed forward, and like the stop, start, continue model. And what I would say then on the one-to-one feedback both ways, it's a culture, and again, we've touched on this before. It really does. And like I say, I think in any conversation, it's a case of asking, or any task you've undertaken, ask for feedback. Just ask, what did I do there that made you feel good? What did I do there that you thought wasn't as good as it? What are my areas of improvement? Ask. I think we can be so scared of feedback because it can be that dreaded word where we think, oh God, what have I done wrong? And we can frame it in that way, and we've got to get out of that mindset, because it's actually a tool for growth. It's a tool for personal development, and it's a great way for us to build a better culture in the workplace. Do you have anything, Katy?
No, just I completely agree with everything you're saying.
Fab, thank you so much. And Katy shared this clever little quote. I thought it was, in the future we can do it like this, and how feedback, we shouldn't be looking back in the past saying you did this, it wasn't good. Katy, I didn't know if you just wanted to share a little bit more on this.
Sorry, was that me? Yeah. Just that, yeah, exactly that. So criticism is focusing on what we don't want, and feedback is focused on what we do want. So just making sure that when we frame that feedback, yes, we can tell someone when they've done something wrong, but we frame it in the way that actually this is what we want you to do going forward. And like we said right at the beginning, if any of us were doing anything wrong, of course we'd want to know about it. We just want to be told about it in a respectful way, and that it's just part of that learning and development piece, isn't it? Particularly if you're new into a role and you just didn't know the way that you were supposed to do something, and then just really getting to that point where you've got that open communication, and someone giving you some negative feedback doesn't seem like a big deal.
I think it's a case of presenting it where it's, like I say, back to this growth mindset, because this is like future. The past's been and gone, but it's this future, and it's there, motivating. We can be motivational managers and motivational leaders. We can build that. If we do this, we can do this. This is about the leadership styles. This is like the visionary leader and delivering it in that way, because then we get that buy-in. But I'm aware we're running out of time, so I'll leave that one there.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Katy. Again, I think we've kind of touched on this from Claire and Katy, that it's a two-way street. So just being open-minded, that filtering up and filtering down feedbacks, really important. Just really keen to get to a little Q&A soon. But Claire and Katy have also shared how business owners and how HR and L&D professionals can work together. This was a really good example that Katy kindly shared with us about what the impacts can be when this goes right or wrong. So again, you can see it on the slide, but Katy and Claire, was there anything else you wanted to add to this for what HR and business owners can take away?
Claire?
I think the disruption to the team is not to be underestimated, because if we get people, in fact, we don't have time, but yeah, I'll not go there. So if we get like you've touched on here, the turnover of the staff and everything, not only have we got the cost implication of bringing a new team member on board, we've got to then integrate that team member into the existing team, and it can really slow the progress down. So I think when we know that feedback and communication can be something that at the very core of this can stop all of this happening, it's pretty obvious that it's something we need to get better at.
Thank you, Claire. Cool. And from feedback and techniques and tools and models, if you haven't already, please do download the PowerPoint slides that are in the resources on your panel. They should be just to the right of your screen. They're all really useful. There's some videos, there's links, there's articles, just to support you on your communication journey. And a little summary we also have. So I'm aware time is running out, so I just really want to get to a couple of questions that have been shared. So we've got from Daniel, I work for a corporation and I see so many poor leadership skills at a higher level where it can feel more of a dictatorship rather collaborating with individuals at a lower level and understanding what they think works. This gets filtered down through management and managers, and people feel obliged to follow rather than challenge new strategies. How would you approach this? Quite a big question.
Do you want to go, Katy, or do you want me to go?
I mean, it's a really good question, and actually something that we get asked quite a lot and I suppose what we're looking at really is culture here. And it's difficult when that culture is being driven from the top down, because it is, if I'm honest, it's difficult to change that. So, but we can only try, and I quite often say to our clients that you're only in control of your own actions and what you do. So you can challenge it, and again, I use the word respectful, I've used it a lot. You can challenge the people at the top in terms of, are they listening? But you can do it in a more roundabout way as well. So perhaps suggesting that you do some engagement surveys where those sort of topics are picked up and then put on the agenda and discussed. But it is difficult when the people up the top are delivering that culture, because it is difficult to change. But if they're not open to change, then unfortunately that leaves you in a difficult situation. Yeah, it's a tricky one, Claire.
I think what I'd say is bring me in to do some leadership training. But then, no, seriously, what I would say is I would look at this feedback and ask if you can give some feedback. Can I just give some feedback on what I'm observing at my level in the organisation, and see where that goes? Because a lot of people don't understand that feedback can go both ways. And they may not be aware. They may not be aware that they're coming over in this way. They may be thinking everything's fine, you know, because nobody said anything, so it must be fine. And they maybe would actually embrace some feedback. And they might actually think, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was presenting in this way. I feel, you know, that's awful that my colleagues have felt this. So I would start with offering some feedback on how you're feeling, because that's going to start things rolling. It has to be addressed, or it'll fester.
And you've got nothing to lose, have you? Because if they don't take it on board, then you're in the same position that you're in anyway.
Of course.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. If anyone does have any more questions, please do reach out to Katy and Claire on their LinkedIn profiles. We've put them on so you can easily connect. They should be just on the screen in front of you. And thank you everyone for joining today. If anyone's interested in any of our previous webinars, we do have a webinar hub. Our next one will be in June. We'll be covering employment law and mental health, so it should make for a very interesting one. A huge thank you for Katy and for Claire joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed today as much as I have. And thank you everyone for joining. And I hope you can go and enjoy some lovely sunshine today, as it looks beautiful out there. Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you, Katy. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.